Hi there, it's Lori from Indulge Your Shelf. I am showing you this big tin of vintage and antique buttons that I found at an estate sale on Saturday. It's Monday, and so I finally have time to go through it and sort through it, and I thought based on the reactions I got from showing a photo of the tin that you guys would get a kick out of seeing a video of everything that came out of it. So that's what I thought I would do today. As you can see, there's much more than just buttons in there. We've got some pin cushions, a little bit of jewelry, of course some buckles, and you never know what else you're going to find. So this ought to be fun. The first thing that I'm going to do is sort through and separate what isn't a button. And I'll also set aside any very plain, uninteresting buttons so that we can concentrate on the ones that are a little bit more fun. So now I have finished with the sorting, and I am going to show you all the junk and buttons that were in this particular button box. We'll start over here. Pieces of, looks like a watch band, a spare key, some jewel-looking clasps, a little toy soldier made of metal, a couple of fountain pen nibs, some of those tokens from stores. There's some from Missouri and some from Colorado. Some have holes, some that don't, some are metal, some are plastic. This little squashed jingle bell, which I think is cute. This is interesting. It looks like it started life as a button, but somebody made it into a pin. So little pieces of probably costume jewelry. This other little clasp made of a very lightweight metal. This nice beaded necklace that is broken, and the beads are starting to come off from the middle here, and then a whole pile of beads, including some of the ones that came off of that, and then some other ones. Also some snaps and washers and nuts and bolts and nails and clips and hairpins. Over here we have a pile of stuff that you always find in button boxes. Game pieces, bullet casings, little rubber tires from toy cars. I even found a jack in this one. I set aside, since I love ephemera, I set aside the extra buttons, envelope, and this piece of film that looks like something you would print an old photo negative on, and this JP Codes thread label, and this little snippet of paper, because those are the kinds of things you can easily throw onto your mixed media collages. And then again, you almost always find a needle case in these button tins. This one looks to be homemade and has just a few needles in it. It's fabric over cardboard, just very simple. And then I found a pile of rocks. I don't usually find rocks in button tins, but this time I did. And then every kind of buckle you can imagine. Most of them are quite old plastic. Some of them are newer. This is my favorite. I think that's very pretty. And just the miscellaneous kinds of metal things that you find at the bottom of these tins. I particularly like these corkscrewy little metal pieces. I think they would be fun in a mixed media piece. My favorite thing that I found is this old stickers, probably from the 20s or early 30s. Do not open till December 25th. It's a Christmas sticker, and I collect those, so that was just a huge bonus for me. Then, if you're lucky, you find some buttons that are still carded. I didn't find any full cards this time, but just a bunch of random carded ones, and they're pretty old too. I think it's pretty cool that this one is a buckle and it's matching button. So those are collectible or sellable. People do like to have those or use them in their art. I purposely set aside these buttons that were fabric because when I purchased this button box, it was labeled at the estate sale that it contained vintage buttons, some of which were made with human hair. Now, I opened up the button box at the sale, sat myself down on the sofa, and looked through it pretty carefully. I did not see any that were human hair buttons. The only one out of here, I looked carefully as I was going through them today, just now, and the only one here that looks like it's possible, maybe slightly possible, that it could be a human hair button is this one. But I think that's doubtful. Anyway, because there were supposedly human hair buttons in there, the estate sale had the button tin priced at $20. Well, I was there on half price day, so it would have been $10. And because there was no human hair button in it, I took it up to the cash register, the tin up, and I said to the guy, you know, I looked very carefully. I know a lot about buttons, and there are no human hair buttons. I think somebody either took them out or you sold them separately on an earlier day of the sale. So he just kind of shrugged and said, okay. I said, well, I wouldn't pay even $10 for these buttons. I don't think they're worth that, but I would give you $5 for the tin. So he was acceptable of that, and so that's how I ended up with a button tin. But anyway, it just goes to show you, you know, it doesn't ever hurt to ask and to point out, you know, if you think something's priced too high, you can always talk to them and tell them, here's why I think this price is too high, and here's what I would be willing to spend. Always a good idea to have your magnifying glass with you when you're looking at buttons too, because you just never know what you're going to find. Anyway, I'm showing you this pile of all of the mother of pearl or shell buttons that were in this button tin. And that's because I have a particular affinity for mother of pearl buttons. I love them. They're my favorite. And this one had just a ton of really common ones, mostly off-white, but some of different colors. And among the ones of different colors was this one that I thought was so cool. It's a bluish tinged shell on the bottom, and then it has an attached metal embellishment on it. So I just think that is the coolest. You'll have to excuse my fingernails. I've been digging through all this dirty stuff just now, and they're not as pretty as they might normally be. Yeah, so I found some blue ones and a random pink one, a couple of pink ones, but mostly it's just these off-white buttons. Now, before I show you the ones that I set aside, let me show you what was at the bottom of the button tin. I left this purposely to show you how dirty and grungy these button tins can be. Everything that's in here is something that is junk as far as I'm concerned. There's lots of pieces of chalk because people often use them when they're sewing and crafting. There's some pieces of crayon, a few random little pieces of paper and foil, and all the buttons that you see that I threw in there are cracked or damaged, and that's why I'm just not going to keep them. So that's what you have to go through. You have to be willing to get dirty when you're looking through buttons. Anyway, I want to go ahead and show you the ones that I pulled aside as the ones that I thought were worth keeping, and why. So these are the buttons I thought were worth keeping. Even though they're kind of common, they are, most of them are older plastic that you just don't find anymore. And most of them are in shapes and styles that you just don't see anymore. And some of them need further investigation, like this little duckling is possibly Bakelite, not sure, but I do want to check into that before I just throw it aside. And any buttons that are valuable to me are any buttons that I might that might look pretty or that I think I might use in a craft. So all of these buttons qualify for that. The reason I saved this little sewn together bundle of round buttons, round metal buttons, is that they're really, they're old and they're really neat. They're lightweight and they're just fun to touch, and they just have a lot of tactile interest, and people love it when they get little bundles of buttons that somebody long ago has sewn together to keep together. Another thing that I think is a really fabulous find is these buttons. Now, at first they look like pearls. At first they look like they might be beads, but they are buttons. And what's special about them is that they're made of blown glass. very delicate but sturdy at the same time. And so it was really nice to find 5 of the same size, and again, all tied together. So that was cool. This little button is a little wooden hat. So that's a cute one. Those are kind of collectible. And as you can see, the rest of them, you know, this one has nice embellished, sort of imprinted, embossed design. And this one is nice because it's sparkly and it can kind of mimic a piece of jewelry. This one's nice because it's made of celluloid and it's quite old. These blue ones are cute because they have just an interesting kind of a baskety, sweatery yarn design on them, and I think they would look really cute on any kind of craft that they matched. So that's why I kept those. And the red ones, even if they weren't particularly exciting, I kept all the red ones because I'm always using red buttons, old red buttons in my Christmas crafting. Then on this side of the tin, I saved all of the buttons that were made of glass or china. So there were actually, in this button box, it was very unusual that there weren't very many glass buttons. This black glass button is pretty special because it's what we call a whistle, because it has the one hole on the one side and then the 2 holes on the other side. And it's a nice example of an old black glass button. This button is pretty because it's clear glass and then it has some metal coloring over it so that it kind of makes it look a little bit silver and shimmery. And these buttons that have the designs on them are known as, I want to say calico buttons, but actually they're not always correctly called calico buttons. It just depends on what the design is. But the thing they have in common is they're all made out of china, and they all have a cute design or pattern on them, and they're a little bit collectible. The buttons that have the bigger holes were typically used in the olden days as underwear buttons or undergarment buttons. So I thought that was kind of interesting. This button has the little edging all along it, and we call that pie crust edging on a china button. This glass button is very inexpensively made. It almost isn't glass, but it's just barely glass. It's almost plastic, but it's not. It's actually glass tested, but it's not a high quality one. And these are cute because this is just a pair of, you know, exactly what you think they are. They're like little cufflinks to hold your the 2 holes in your sleeves together, and they're made of white porcelain. So those are the buttons that I thought were the most fun out of this whole box that I went through. It took me about an hour and 15 minutes to go through it because I went through it very carefully. I'm showing you as we're getting ready to finish here, this fun strip of buttons that somebody obviously pulled off of a dress or a blouse, and these are all glass, black glass that has paint on it. So I thought that was fun too. Oh, and I was going to point out that when you find little buttons like this, again, they typically are underwear buttons, the ones that have the bigger holes, but this, as you can see, is probably made of bone. So all the ones that I thought might be bone, I threw on this side so that I could investigate further, because they're interesting and they look fun in primitive crafts. And last but not least, this is the pile of buttons that I took out and separated that have no value to me. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have any value at all. I'm just saying that to me, they have no value because they're very common. Some of them are metal. Some of them are a little bit beat up. I don't particularly enjoy neutral colored buttons, and so I just threw them all in a pile. So as you can see, this is the throwaway. Now, you may notice that when you're in an antique store that there will be ball jars or mason jars full of buttons, and often they'll be full of buttons that look like this. I would say don't spend money on those buttons. Those are just, you know, super common buttons. What you're really looking for is something pretty spectacular like the ones that I pulled out. And then all this junk that you can put together in a bag and call junk drawer stuff, or use in your mixed media art. So I hope you have enjoyed this little tour through the button tin. And give me a comment and let me know if you have anything to say about it, or if you notice anything special, or even just to let me know what your favorite ones were. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye.